The Young and the Restless spoilers Wednesday full episodes June 18, 2025 as the sleek black car rolled through the cobblestone path leading to the Grand Chateau in the French countryside, the air was already thick with anticipation. The Dumas party, cloaked in extravagance and mystery, had drawn the most powerful and the most secretive from Genoa City and beyond. Every invitation had been deliberate. Every guest handpicked for their relevance, past, present, or impending. But for some, like Tessa Porter, the journey to this opulent stage was less about power plays and more about finally confronting the truth of a relationship that had begun to fracture in silence. Tessa had spent weeks walking on eggshells around Mariah Copeland, watching the woman she loved retreat further into herself with every passing day. At first, she thought it was just stress, lingering shadows from their past, career frustrations, or simply the weight of motherhood. But now, as she sat in the back seat of the limo and watched Mariah stare vacantly out the window, saying nothing, feeling nothing, she knew it was something deeper. Something broken. And it was driving her mad. "Are you even here?" Tessa whispered, voice low but edged with exhaustion. Mariah didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. That was the problem. She was physically present, but emotionally unreachable, trapped in some internal war that Tessa had been shut out of for far too long. It wasn't just about communication anymore. It was about erasure. Mariah had stopped sharing her fears, her dreams, even her casual thoughts. She was a ghost wearing Mariah's skin. And for Tessa, the woman who had once fought the world to love her, the silence had become unbearable. "I can't keep doing this," Tessa said finally. "I can't keep chasing someone who won't even tell me why she's running." Mariah turned then, slowly, her face pale in the dim light of the vehicle, her eyes glassy with unshed emotion. But she didn't respond. She couldn't. Because what lived inside her now wasn't something she could name, not yet. It was fear. It was guilt. It was a secret buried so deeply inside her that even she wasn't sure where it ended and she began. And this party, this destination, was not just another lavish event. It was a reckoning. Across the grounds, the chateau glowed like a living jewel against the night sky. Guests arrived in waves, draped in designer suits and flowing gowns, their faces etched with both wonder and suspicion. Among them was Amanda Sinclair, calm and graceful as always, though a strange tension danced beneath her perfect composure. Everyone knew she was here as Dumas's attorney. That had been her official title, her stated purpose. But few knew the full truth. Few understood the intimacy, the entanglement, the personal history that tied her to the man whose name had become synonymous with secrets and control. When she stepped into the main hall, the opulence of the room barely registered. Her mind was elsewhere, on the moment she knew was coming. On the judgment. The betrayal. The disbelief. She had prepared for this for months. But no amount of legal training or courtroom composure could shield her from the weight of what she was about to reveal. Lily Winters caught sight of Amanda from across the marble floor and approached with a cautious smile. "So," she said softly, "you're the attorney of the man who's holding half of Genoa City's secrets in his fist." Her tone was teasing, but the edge beneath it was sharp. Amanda's smile didn't reach her eyes. "There's more to the story," she said. "And I think you're about to hear all of it." Meanwhile, the crowd had begun to murmur. Something was shifting in the energy of the room. A stillness before the storm. And then the music softened. The lights dimmed. And the voice everyone had waited for filled the room, not from above, not from some hidden speaker, but from the stairs that descended from the upper landing. Aristotle Dumas stood tall, dressed in a black tailored suit, his face calm, his movements deliberate. And as he stepped into the light, a collective gasp echoed through the room. It wasn't just the revelation that Dumas was Billy Flynn's character. It was that he wasn't a stranger. Not really. To some, his face looked familiar, uncanny in its familiarity. To others, it was the way he moved, the cadence of his voice, that triggered unease. But for Amanda, the recognition was visceral. Because this wasn't just a man she worked for. This was a man she once loved. A man she might still love. And as he looked directly at her across the room, the truth broke like glass. Amanda took a slow breath and stepped forward. Her heels clicked on the marble with measured precision as she addressed the crowd. "There's something I need to say," she began, her voice steady but low. "For those of you wondering why I'm here. Why I represent him. Why I stayed silent." She turned to Dumas. He gave her a slight nod, permission, trust, surrender. "We met years ago. Before the name Dumas existed. Before the masks and the games. We were more than colleagues. We were partners. In law. In life. And for a time, I was his wife." The room fell silent. The shock was total. Tessa dropped her champagne glass. Devon blinked as if trying to recalibrate time. Even Mariah stirred from her haze. Amanda continued. "When he disappeared from my life, I thought he'd died. Or changed. Or chosen ambition over love. But now I know, he was building something. And while I don't agree with everything he's done, I understand why he did it." The crowd rippled with disbelief. "You're married to him," someone whispered. "No," Amanda said. "Not anymore. But I was. And what we had was real." Dumas stepped forward then, standing beside her, his hand brushing hers briefly before he faced the crowd. "I built this empire," he said, "to reveal truth. Not for vengeance. But because secrets are poison. They destroy from within. And it's time everyone here faced theirs." And just like that, envelopes were passed around the room again, each one containing a new truth. New poison. New collapse. Mariah's hands trembled as she opened hers. Inside was a photo. A moment from years ago. A hospital room. A child. A decision she had made without telling Tessa. Her breath caught in her throat. And across the room, Tessa watched her fall apart without knowing why. Amanda, standing at the center of it all, finally felt the past and present collide in one brutal instant. She had tried to shield them. To balance truth with dignity. But Dumas had never been one for half measures. And now, the reckoning was real. The party continued. But no one danced. No one laughed. Only the truth moved, like a shadow, cutting through everything it touched. Would you like me to continue with the aftermath of Amanda's confession and Mariah's secret being exposed? Or explore what Dumas's real endgame might be now that all the pieces are in motion? Back in Genoa City, the air had shifted. Though the party in France had concluded with champagne and chaos, the aftershocks were only beginning to hit home. In a modest two-story house not far from Crimson Lights, Tessa Porter stood by the window of the bedroom she had once shared in warmth and intimacy with her wife, Mariah Copeland. But now that bed felt colder than it had in years. The silence between them had become a living thing, threading itself through every interaction, every room, every look. Tessa had waited. She had been patient. She had accepted the evasions, the tears, the fragmented explanations. But she could no longer deny what she already knew: something had happened on that business trip. And it was worse than anything Mariah was willing to admit. It hadn't been the first time Mariah stumbled home emotionally disoriented after a long stretch away. But this time was different. She had returned with a hollowness that Tessa couldn't fill no matter how many songs she wrote, how many gentle questions she asked, how many nights she waited for answers that never came. The final straw came on a quiet afternoon, with a single sentence. "I was drunk," Mariah had whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't remember everything. But it wasn't enough. Not anymore." Tessa stared at her now, eyes glistening with a mixture of heartbreak and resolve. "I've begged you," she said, her voice shaking. "Begged you for the truth. I'm not asking for perfection, Mariah. I'm asking for honesty. If you made a mistake, I can handle that. But this silence, it's killing us. Mariah turned away, hands buried in the pockets of her cardigan, shoulders hunched with the weight of too many lies. The truth was, she did remember. She remembered the hotel room, the unfamiliar bed, the blurred voice whispering her name in the dark. She remembered the shame that followed, the panic. But she had buried it beneath excuses and justifications. She didn't know how to tell Tessa that the worst part wasn't the act itself, it was how easy it had been to lose herself in someone else's arms when things got hard. And she feared that once the words came out, she'd never get her wife's trust, or love, back. But Tessa was already at the door, one hand on the handle. I need space, she said quietly. Until you decide to stop hiding from me, from yourself. I can't keep waiting. Mariah said nothing. And the door closed behind her like the final note of a love song gone wrong. Meanwhile, across town, Jack Abbott sat in his office at Jabot, the blinds drawn against the sunlight. His hands gripped the arms of his chair, knuckles white. He had returned from the Dumas party with a knot in his stomach that hadn't loosened since. At first, he thought it was indigestion or fatigue from the travel. But it wasn't physical. It was regret, deep, gnawing, corrosive regret. He had gone to the party expecting networking, maybe a touch of glamour, perhaps even an opportunity to reclaim some old leverage. But what he had witnessed instead had shaken him. Dumas hadn't just exposed secrets, he had reshaped reputations, destroyed alliances, turned family members against one another with nothing more than paper and truth. Jack had prided himself on his wisdom, his resilience, his ability to read a room. But in that gilded hall in France, he had been outplayed. Manipulated. And now, he couldn't stop asking himself, what secrets of his had Dumas held back? What time bomb was still ticking? Elsewhere, the air crackled with unexpected tenderness. Adam Newman, usually cloaked in cynicism and loneliness, found himself walking through Chancellor Park beside Chelsea Lawson, their fingers brushing as they spoke about nothing and everything. The chaos of France had brought them closer, oddly enough, not through trauma, but through shared exhaustion. Adam had nearly lost everything again. And Chelsea, watching him struggle to maintain composure beneath his usual bravado, had seen something different in him. Vulnerability, honesty, the man he used to be. They sat on a bench beneath a white oak tree, and when Adam turned to her, there was something unspoken in his eyes. Chelsea didn't resist when he leaned in. The kiss was soft, familiar, cautious, but real. And in that moment, it didn't matter what came next. They had found each other again, if only for now. But across the ocean, Phyllis Summers was preparing a storm of her own. She had not forgotten what Dumas had done. The humiliation, the exposure, the way he had twisted truths like a blade against her credibility. And she wasn't one to be underestimated. She had already begun assembling a dossier of her own, names, dates, shell companies connected to Dumas, whispers from international associates who owed her favors. She didn't intend to destroy him publicly, not yet. She intended to terrify him first. To let him know she wasn't afraid. That he had made a mistake coming after her. And when she was done, Dumas would wish he'd left her alone. But the darkest move belonged to Audra Charles. She was no longer the same woman who once flitted through the offices of Newman Media with subtle charm and quiet ambition. She had made a deal with Victor, one that would reshape the board, the family, and her own destiny. If she succeeded in destroying Kyle Abbott's reputation, Victor would fund her new company, elevate her beyond the games of the past. It was a deal made in shadows, with consequences neither fully understood. But Audra didn't care anymore. She had power now. And she would use it. Kyle was already vulnerable. France had shaken him. His relationship with Claire was strained. And Audra, elegant and controlled, began to circle him once more, not as a lover, not even as a friend, but as the perfect saboteur. She whispered into the right ears, arranged the wrong meeting at the right time, planted the idea that Kyle had betrayed Claire's trust with someone in France. The photos were staged, the timeline doctored, but the impact was real. Claire began to pull away. Kyle's calls went unanswered. And Audra, watching from her suite, poured a glass of wine and smiled. She hadn't needed to seduce him. Not yet. But Kyle, emotionally raw and confused, soon sought comfort in familiar arms. And Audra knew it would only take one night. One moment. One perfectly staged encounter. The trap was already closing. And back in Genoa City, Victor Newman watched the pieces fall into place, one by one. He had made a deal with a devil of his own creation. Audra had become more than an ally, she was a force. Dangerous. Brilliant. And for now, loyal. But Victor also knew, she was only loyal while the goals suited her. And when her goals changed, he would be next. Would you like to continue with the breakdown of Kyle and Claire's relationship, or the full return of Tessa and Mariah's confrontation once the truth is finally revealed? The morning sunlight filtered softly through the sheer curtains of Nate's townhouse, casting gentle golden hues across the kitchen island where steaming cups of coffee and half-eaten croissants lay in scattered formation. The air was warm, but the tension among the people gathered inside was colder than the wind brushing against the window panes. Lily stood beside the couch, arms crossed, her eyes narrowed not in irritation but in restless anticipation. She had been preparing for this trip to France for days, but now that the moment was real, now that the hours were ticking down and the flight was in motion, something deeper stirred within her. She wasn't nervous. She was ready. Too ready. As if part of her had been waiting for the storm that was coming. Devon, ever the one to find levity when silence got too thick, chuckled as he glanced at the rows of designer luggage lined up neatly by the door. I mean, are we moving there or just staying the weekend? He teased, his smile directed at Abby and Lily. I counted 5 suitcases for 3 people. Abby rolled her eyes playfully, adjusting the strap of her carry-on. Some of us plan for wardrobe changes, Devon. It's called style. But her tone, though light, couldn't completely mask the undercurrent of concern swirling just beneath. She had felt it too, the unspoken worry threading through every conversation since Victor had confirmed the Dumas party wasn't just a social event, but a calculated convergence. A reckoning disguised as celebration. Nate walked in from the hallway, phone in hand, his face unreadable. Just got off the call with Damien, he announced, glancing at Lily. He's having breakfast and then heading to the airport. Should be in France by the time we land. Lily raised an eyebrow, but her mind was already racing. And he's okay? About going? Her tone was casual, but inside, she felt a prickle of unease. Damien had grown so much in recent months, emotionally, professionally, but there were still cracks, old wounds, questions about his history that not even he fully understood. Sending him into the lion's den with Dumas? It felt like fate toying with unfinished business. He says he's fine, Nate replied, pouring himself a second cup of coffee. But who knows what anyone really feels going into this? I'm trying to convince myself this isn't some elaborate trap. He leaned against the counter, eyes scanning the room. Because let's be honest, who throws a party for half of Genoa City's most complicated power players, unless they're planning something? Lily smiled tightly. Maybe he's just eccentric, she said, though she didn't believe it. Amanda told me Dumas wasn't going after Winters. That this isn't personal. She said it as if repeating it would make it true. But even she could hear the weakness in her voice. Devon shook his head slowly. Amanda says a lot of things. And I want to believe her, but, he trailed off, then added, Victor told me Dumas knew about us months ago. About me. About our businesses. That means he's been watching, listening. That's not coincidence. That's premeditation. Lily felt her stomach tighten. Do we even know what he wants from us? She asked quietly. Or from any of us? Why gather everyone under one roof? Nate glanced at her, his expression darkening. That's what I keep asking myself. What does a man like Dumas gain from inviting a list of people with nothing in common except ambition, family dysfunction, and secrets? It's not a reunion. It's an ambush. And then it came? The revelation that shifted the energy in the room like a dropped bomb. Oh, Nate added, almost as an afterthought, Audra's on the guest list too. The name hit Lily like ice water. Her body went still, her jaw tightening as her brain tried to process the implications. Audra, she repeated. Audra Charles is going to be there? Nate nodded, unaware of the emotional explosion his words had triggered. Yeah. Apparently she's in France already. Victor's backing some new project of hers. He didn't mention it earlier? Lily turned away, trying to mask the storm that raged behind her eyes. Of all the people Dumas could have aligned with, Audra was the one name she hadn't anticipated, hadn't wanted to hear. Their past wasn't exactly public, but it wasn't clean either. There had been competition. Betrayal. Power plays that cut deeper than either of them would ever admit. And now she was suddenly a guest at the most important, and potentially dangerous, event of the year? That didn't feel like coincidence. That felt like a setup. Unbelievable, Lily muttered. So Dumas invites Amanda, Victor, the Winters family, and now Audra? What's he doing, building a reality show? Abby exchanged glances with Devon. Even she could sense the weight behind Lily's sarcasm. But Devon wasn't laughing anymore. I don't like this, he said. Not any of it. There's too much happening behind the scenes. Dumas doesn't just gather names like this without purpose. And Victor being quiet about Audra? That's not a good sign. Nate nodded. You think there's something going on between them? I think, Devon said, that Victor always has a reason for aligning with someone like her. And if he's investing in her new company, it's not because he believes in her vision. It's because she's useful. To him. And to Dumas. Lily stepped out onto the balcony, needing air, needing space from the walls that suddenly felt too close. Her mind was spinning. Not just about Audra, but about Amanda, about the way Dumas had pulled all these people together like a puppeteer prepping his stage. And the worst part? They were all walking straight into it. From inside, she could hear Nate still talking. We need to be ready, he said. Not just for the party. But for the fallout. Because whatever Dumas is planning, I don't think any of us are coming back the same.